I'm Abe Friedtanzer,
I'm Sari Cohen.
And I'm Scott Menzel.
and we're here talking about one of our favorite award shows, the Emmy Awards, honoring the best in television, and soon to announce nominations for this year. And this is personally my favorite part of the process, predicting things, because anything could be nominated. We could have some wild surprises in store. And I always like to start with the stats, because before you have the buzz, you have the history. And so you have to see, like, we know what's popular this year. We think we know what's popular this year, but what historically has been the case. And this is one of the most fascinating categories because if we look at last year's nominees, let's go through them for a second. The Crown, Fallout, The Gilded Age, The Morning Show, Mr. and Mrs. Smith, Shogun, Slow Horses, and Three Body Problem. The Crown is over, and we are waiting on the next season of Fallout, The Gilded Age, The Morning Show, Mr. and Mrs. Smith, Shogun, and Three Body Problem, which means exactly one of last year's nominees, Slow Horses, is eligible again this year. And that is just really exciting to me because that's something we've actually seen a couple times recently, but like we have a fresh, open race. However, we have the same number of nominees that are not eligible from last year we have from past nominees that were nominated the last time they were eligible. So back in 2023, we had Andor, House of the Dragon, The Last of Us, The White Lotus, and Yellow Jackets, which are both eligible again. And in that case, every season that has aired has been nominated. So if we were just to look from a historical perspective, those should all return, no problem. Go back one more year, Severance and Squid Game. And while a lot of time has passed and those two might have sort of diverged in terms of enthusiasm, they're 100% in terms of the past and what they've been nominated. The Handmaid's Tale was nominated for season one, two, three, four, and then almost completely shut out for season five and not up for Best Drama Series. So it's been a couple of years. As we're talking and recording this, the finale has literally just premiered, so it's fresh in everyone's mind. So we'll see if that's something. Bridgerton was nominated for season one, not for season two, took some time off, got some SAG nominations. So that's something to think about. And a show that I know we like a lot here, The Boys, was only nominated for season two, not for season one, not for season three, and now season four is eligible before season five comes back. Additionally, three other past shows to consider. The Diplomat and Bad Sisters both got nominated for Best Actress in the same year, but not for Best Drama Series. It's possible those will be popular enough. And another show that we've been thinking about for a while that people seem to finally be catching on to this year is Industry. So that leaves us with a lot to think about of shows that have aired in the past. If I was to turn it over to you guys and say, what are the new shows this year that we should be thinking about for Best Drama Series?
I'm gonna go hard with the pit. I think that is a strong contender this year. I think it has been consistently adored and by people within the industry. So, we like to ask the question of what is everybody watching across the board. I always get from other actors or other creators, the pit. Love the pit. Love the pit. So I think that has a really strong chance at kind of wiping the slate this year.
I would have to agree. I think The Pit is the strongest of all the new shows that are currently in the drama category. It seems like the little engine that could kind of started off with very little buzz, I have to admit. And as the season has went on, everyone started to talk about it. And it was interesting because I feel like Severance and The Pit almost swap places, where in the beginning everyone was talking about Severance, 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 and then all of a sudden that kind of started turning into The Pit, 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 Pit. One other show that I would actually also throw into this that I feel like has gotten a sizable amount of buzz, and it's probably because of the amount of actors who are working with this. I would say that it's Paradise, and that's a show that's on Hulu with James Marsden and Sterling K. Brown and Julian Nicholson, all of which are no strangers to the Emmys. So I would not be surprised if that manages to sneak into a couple categories. I don't know if it's going to sneak into drama series, but it could sneak into maybe some acting categories.
Can I ask you real quick also, where do you think Landman falls with this because I feel like there's kind of there's also been a buzz about that, and between Billy Bob and Ali Larter, it's a solid show, and like it's a solid show.
I
It could,
wonder if Abe has stats on this in terms of Yellowstone, how that did at the Emmys, because to my recollection, it did not do as well as most people expected it to do. And I feel like Landman has less buzz than Yellowstone did. So, outside of maybe a surprise nomination for Billy Bob Thornton, I don't really see this being nominated at all.
I think Billy Bob Thornton could get a nom for this. I really do. I think that he actually will. And I think because it's Billy Bob Thornton, that this is another show where like it is acclaimed. People really like it. I don't know anybody that has seen Landman and been like, it's okay. Like they're like, no, this is a really good show. I can't stop watching the show. And I know that Taylor Sheridan has that effect, like the Yellowstone effect. People do. They get very, very into his universe. But I think Billy Bob on his own, like he's he's phenomenal.
I think it's definitely possible. I think it's similar to how Sterling K. Brown seems much safer than Paradise as a show, that even if that didn't get anywhere else. And I think Scott is correct that despite being a cultural phenomenon, Yellowstone has not been an Emmy juggernaut. I always like to cite the stat that there was like a thing about streaming services and political leanings of subscribers, and it's like every streaming service leans liberal except for Paramount Plus, which is overwhelmingly conservative. And so it's possible that translates to Hollywood also. Obviously, that's not a catch-all. There are certainly things on CBS and Paramount Plus that are popular. Um, but I don't know. I don't see it. I also know that I always look at like Golden Globes versus Emmys, and while it doesn't necessarily influence it, Goliath, Billy Bob won a Golden Globe for Goliath, and that was never an Emmy player, and so I'm not sure. I think one show we've been underestimating consistently is Day of the Jackal that got Golden Globe and SAG nominations, and I don't know that it's been that talked about, but it did go over pretty well mid-year, and viewership wise, I think got great stats, and so I think it would be a mistake to discount that, to discount Eddie, and even the show because a SAG ensemble nomination was not something I saw coming for that series, and for it to get it obviously means that people in the industry are excited about it.
You are looking at a different
Um,
body of voters, though.
that's true.
And that I think there is such strong competition this year. I don't know that Day of the Jackal, while it is very good, I don't know that it could survive with this voting body. But you never know.
Well,
Well,
we're
I mean,
talking.
what else
Yes,
is
Scott, go ahead.
fascinating is the fact that, we have two very highly praised broadcast shows here that we have not brought up at all. Because the reality is that they're not going to show up in this category as much as people have talked about them, and that is High Potential and Matlock. So, two shows with people who have been nominated for many Emmys and may actually get an Emmy nomination this time around, with Caitlin Olsen and, of course, Kathy Bates. But the show itself almost kind of has fizzled out, and, just kind of even looking at colleagues and stuff like that, does not appear that either one of these shows is going to hit drama series at all. They're very far down the list. And I think that's kind of sad because we've talked about this in previous recordings not tied to the Emmys, but there's a lot of great stuff on broadcast television right now, and it's just unfortunate because it just doesn't capture the zeitgeist as well as the stuff does when it's on streaming nowadays, and that's kind of sad. Even though they're trying to, put them on like Hulu or Paramount Plus, but it sort of seems like unless it's like specific to that streaming platform, that sure they're getting more viewership, but they're not getting the people who need to see it in order to get the votes.
I wouldn't count out Matlock quite so much. I think that people do have such an affinity for Kathy Bates that translates. I don't think the same is true for High Potential. I think it's a fun show, but I wouldn't put that in the same category here. Um, I don't know. I think, yeah, I think Matlock could easily be a surprise. I think that We still have Abbott Elementary going strong in the comedy series race to, represent broadcast networks single-handedly. But The Good Wife was the last sort of one in the drama series to be nominated multiple times, and so I feel like Matlock, while less serious than that show, is a sort of successor to that makes some sense. And if see anything from a broadcast network, I think that one has a solid chance of surprising.
Yeah, I think Kathy Bates will get the nom for that, but I don't predict that the show itself will.
I
Yeah.
also, Sarah, you were talking about, asking people what they're watching. People have been saying Your Friends and Neighbors a lot, and that is a show. John Hamm is an interesting. Mad Men had the dishonor of losing every single acting prize it ever got nominated for it before John Hamm won for the final season. And so I think John Hamm carries a lot of gravitas, and this is a good role for him. He got nominations for both Fargo and Morning Show last year, and he's is very good in this show. We have a lot of other people in it, and I feel like in terms of when stuff is premiering, that's like that came after the pit. So that is the fresh thing. People are still excited about the pit, but Your Friends and Neighbors is new, it's shiny, it's coming back for season two. Like there's a lot of stuff about it that I feel like it could be hitting at the right time. And Apple seems to do pretty well in this category. So I think that one has a definite recency bias edge.
Oh, I agree. I agree. I think that show is highly loved by voters. I think I was at an event a couple weeks ago, and it was a few days before Your Friends and Neighbors, and everyone was talking about it. They were like, "Oh, I can't wait for that event." So I do think that this has a lot of buzz around it, and I think people, it's very interesting because I think we get very caught up in just sort of like, oh, these are the shows, and I think that we're gonna see at least one surprise in a lot of these categories this year, and I would not be surprised whatsoever if it's Your Friends and Neighbors.
Very interesting. I just think there's so much competition. I don't think I think it's definitely a possibility. And we were kind of just talking about this before we started. I feel like Severance is going to be that kind of surprise. Um, that is a show that I feel like it has been building to the point where it's what we were just talking about it. It's the favorite now. It's like the top predicted to win. Um, I don't know. I don't know. It's interesting. I just feel like it's really there's so much good stuff out there that it's really hard to choose.
Yeah.
Knowing that there'll be nominees makes it really interesting because as we go through, we'll see like how far do we get until we're both like, what is next? And I want to throw one more wild card into the mix, mainly just to get Scott to shake his head, and that's Daredevil Born Again. Because to me, Daredevil Born Again and The Penguin are very similar in terms of these like dark, gritty reimaginings of certain things. And I don't it's sort of like when Peacemaker and Hawkeye were on. It was like there were certain similarities, and neither of those really took off at all Emmy wise, and so that may be a bad comparison. But the Penguin is going to do well. That's in the limited series category, and so I wonder because I think there is a certain critical respect for Daredevil that is far beyond anything Marvel has ever done. I think Daredevil has consistently been that much more praised and is widely regarded to be the best TV thing they've done. Loki obviously, combusted completely at the Emmys when it should have had some easy ins for season two. Um, but I do think that's certainly possible, even if it's just the two actors. But I feel like people love Marvel stuff, and if it's the thing they love most of the Marvel stuff, Black Panther got nominated for Best Picture. That was it. Nothing else is getting in ever, probably. But is this something that could happen here? And I don't know if that's just a wild thought on my part, or if you think that's potentially possible.
I mean, I think the difference is with the Penguin, you have two people who are very familiar with strong performances. And I think especially with Colin Farrell, like, I mean, everyone, whether you like him or you don't like him, like he is a juggernaut in terms of performance. And he has done so many iconic roles, both on TV and in film, that you always see his name come up when it comes to awards. He's always in the prediction somewhere. So I think it's very easy to kind of throw him into the ring. Kristen Malati, is that how you say her name?
Milioti, I think, yes.
Miliali. She is really, again, she's someone else who's really kind of shown her worth a lot in television, and I think we've seen this kind of come up repeatedly as well. In terms of, Marvel, I feel like the Daredevil buzz started off very weak. I mean, it's kind of it's an interesting theme that we're talking about this season so far because there's another show where I feel like it was the opposite, which I'll talk about in a second. But Daredevil started off very weak. People were like, I'm not really sure, but it ended really strong. But the time and the campaigning for this is kind of where I'm a little bit more questionable about because I think it kind of came and went. With Andor, we have something going on at the end of this week, which is very close to voting. And I'm sure they're going to start pushing out the actors more for campaigning, where I feel like for Daredevil, they already did it. Most of the stuff went up. I think it's going to get lost. Um, One real thing that I want to talk about real quick is The Last of Us. Now, we have seen that the first two episodes of the show were buzzing like crazy. Um, I don't know if that's a spoiler. Everybody on the internet ruined it. Pedro Pascal dies in the second episode. We all know this at this point. After that, I feel like it was like, "Ow!" And they released the numbers of how much the viewership dropped on this show over the last two episodes. And I think that a lot of people who have this kind of high up, I'm not saying that it's not going to get nominated, but I just think that it's further down the list. I don't. I would not have that in like the top three spots. I would have that closer to like 7 and 8 at this point. And I do feel like it's going to affect the actors. I know a lot of people were originally predicting like Caitlin Dever to win. I would check those expectations. I'm not sure she's the sure bet anymore, just because of how much this show has plummeted and how people have expressed a lot of dislike towards what they're doing. So that's just something there. So just figured we're in the same IP kind of conversation, so I figured I'd talk about two IP things at once.
That was that I totally agree with you, Scott. I feel like it was what they did with that show was kind of like the Walking Dead effect, where it was like, you never know, you never know, you never know. But Pedro Pascal was the heart of that show. I mean, he became like on top of like being so acclaimed and so loved, everything that came out online, every meme that was created, it was like just this overwhelming love for Pedro Pascal. So to get rid of your strongest player, even though the heart of the show is like, you never know who's gonna go, who stays, who's gonna live, who's gonna die. I don't know. Yeah, I mean, it still is a very good show, but it's like, can a show survive after it gets rid of its?
Well, the problem is that when you're translating video games into TV shows or movies, right? There's certain plots that happen in video games that, you kind of have to do. But making into a series, again, there's such a strategic move here, which is like maybe not cast him as that character, right? And like not ride the show, the wave of the show based around him. So like they knew this was coming up, but I just think that they thought that all these other actors were going to elevate it. And like the truth of the matter is like they're not going to because they don't have that same kind of pull that he has. I mean, literally in the last like 3 weeks, I feel like we've seen Pedro Pascal every day somewhere. Like it's like he's at the can, he's here, he's there, he's whatever it is. But like he has that star quality where like as much as I love these other actors and I think they're all really great actors, they just don't have that kind of mass appeal. So to rely on the entire series to be pulled by them, it's a little iffy, and I think that's what they're starting to see here is that I think you said it correctly, and I think a couple of my friends mentioned too. It really does feel like the Walking Dead effect, where you're starting to have people drop off, and I know that like next season's all about Caitlin Dever's character, and I know she's a tremendous actress, and I'm one of her biggest fans. But I don't know if people are going to stick around. I really don't.
I would say the more apt comparison to me than The Walking Dead is Game of Thrones, because Game of Thrones has
Mm,
this crazy intense fandom, and season 8, which was reviled in many ways by people, still won Best Drama Series. And so I think that's worth considering here is that people, it may not ultimately win, but I wouldn't count it out of all these nominations. There's also a weird rule now where Pedro can't compete as a guest because he was previously nominated as leader supporting. And so I think that could have been more effective in some ways, but he will likely still be a lead, which is sort of weird, even though Brian Cox did the same thing for the final season of Succession. Not that he won, of course. But also, just while we're on the Game of Thrones thing, House of the Dragon was so popular. Season 1 did very poorly overall, didn't get any acting nominations, but got a Best Drama Series. And now it feels like that couldn't be further from the conversation. And so I'm curious how much all these fandoms will really play into this, because it's still technically an astonishing series.
I was just having this conversation. This is definitely a thing. Yellowstone kind of falls into this, but you also have Rings of Power, you've got Outlander, you've got a lot of these shows that have these tremendous fandoms, and they are big productions, big budgets, incredible talent. And just for some reason, it feels like every year they're snubbed. And it's not even that they're snubbed. It's just, again, I think the competition is so fierce. And you do have these things that trend. You do have The Last of Us is only in season 2. So it's not like we're 8 seasons in and you've based it off that. People are going into The Last of Us either coming from the game or being a fan of Pedro Pascal. So, I guess the showrunners, you had to like they were committed. But that's, like video game canon, it's a different, you look at Halo and those kind of things. It's really that's a hard expectation to live up to. So I don't know if it really translates to the rest of what's going on out there. I don't know.
I think that's something that the Emmy voters in general miss out on. And Abe, this is kind of goes back to your point about Daredevil. There's just something about known IP that really speaks to audiences that doesn't always connect with Emmy voters. And another show that we talked about before we jumped on this was Interview with the Vampire. Interview with the Vampire is like beloved by fans. And I mean the fandom behind that show, and that's because it's based on a series of books. It had, obviously there's a Tom Cruise movie that came out in the 90s. There's a lot of love for that. Outlander, like you said, Siri, I mean, talk about like what a fan base that has supported that show time and time again, but yet we don't really see it popping up. And I think it's really kind of going down to Fallout last year, just real quick, like that also like got some nominations, but didn't to my knowledge did not win anything. This is a real problem, and I think this is something that we talked about when we did our Oscar stream. There is a real disconnect with the public versus voters, and this is something that I think continues to be a problem as we keep talking about this, and something needs to change because there is this disconnect, and why these award shows are kind of losing their ratings is because it's not what people are talking about. It's not what people want. I mean, it's weird in this category to be talking about because we do have two shows that are very much buzz right now that a lot of people do like, but I do just feel like overall there's so much that's missing the mark in all these categories every year that are that average people, that the regular, you know, TV watching audience talks about and watches, and they always go like, why doesn't my show get nominated?
And I would actually close out the franchise conversation by noting that the most successful Emmy related Marvel show is WandaVision, which is in many ways not really a Marvel show. Like it really is its own kind of thing. And so it will be interesting to see what happens this year with that. But I think that shows that the most popular stuff, blockbuster wise, same way Mission Impossible until the last year had not gotten any Oscar nominations throughout its entire history of the franchise. That is one of the most successful, popular things out there, but it doesn't always translate that way. And also, technical wins don't always translate like that. A lot of shows like Fallout, that kind of stuff, it does have technical prowess, but just not the top, above the line kind of stuff. As we're looking at the 8 predicted nominees in this category, I'd say we probably feel secure about maybe 6 of them. I'd be curious to actually go. I think we can interchange, but we're going to say 1 and 2 in the same breath is Severance and The Pit. Whichever one is 1 or 2 doesn't matter. After that, as we get to slot number 3, given some lack of trust in The Last of Us, I think the safest bet is probably The White Lotus, because even if that doesn't go over well, the world in which that doesn't get nominated doesn't exist, right? That's just not going to happen. And I would probably still keep Last of Us in 4th, but I think Andor is coming on very, very strong. And I feel like, Sari, do you want to jump in here?
I don't know if Andor will take that slot, at least for me in my world. I mean, it's possible. But I see more of like I know we'll get to it, but like The Diplomat or Slow Horses. But I don't know if Andor's. This might be an unpopular opinion. I don't know if Andor's in the running for me.
I think people just are so like I also it's not my absolute favorite thing. I do like Star Wars a lot. I never got quite as into the show as other people, but people are heaping this incredible praise on it. The best thing you've ever seen. Star Wars fans who've been around since the first movies came out, and they love it. And the first season did do pretty well, Emmy nominations wise.
I will say also then to that respect, like Squid Game. So we've got Squid Game back in the running. And although I think season 2 is very different than season 1, that also was a heavily favorited show the first time around. So I feel like that could easily take the spot.
I would say buzz wise, I feel like Squid Game sort of came and went, and there's a lot more momentum that's going to be happening. I think season 3 is coming out in June. Like it's coming very soon,
I think it's June 27th, actually.
which is going to cause our favorite, the bear effect every year of what season are we voting for? And if it does get nominated, it could lead to some wins for season 3 that are incorrect, because season 3 is very much next season. It also feels weird to put Slow Horses this low, given that it's the only potential returning nominee. That said, season 1 and 2 were almost completely shut out. And to assume that that's a favorite now is a risky thing because it took people so long to get into it, you know?
Show is consistently good, and I don't know why people are sleeping on it. I mean, again, my guess would be because there's so much content, but I mean, you've Gary Oldman, that cast is so good. It's just consistently good. This also is the same thing. Season 4 was so long ago. And I think season 5, I want to say, comes out over the summer, and they're already shooting season 6. So they're like, yeah, to revisit this is like same thing with Rings of Power. All these shows that get shot. I mean, there by the time we're at this point where we're nominating people for their work, it's been like 3 years in the making of like what. But yeah, I mean, yeah, I don't know.
God, what do you think about the?
I mean, it's a really tough spot. I mean, I think Abe, I really liked what you had there. I mean, I think we would all go back and forth on the Pit and Severance, whether it's 1 or 2. I mean, it's really tough where those fall. And then, I mean, but I think we're all kind of in agreement that White Lotus is 3. And then once you start getting to, 4, and I'm going to agree that Last of Us is definitely getting in here, and it's going to be 4, because again, it's perspective, it's fresh in people's minds, whether you love it or hate it, it's there. But then it's like you said, as soon as we get to 5, I am really lost here. I don't know. Because did Andor get nominated for series or actor?
Serious.
Series, but didn't get actor?
I don't think so. I must.
I think yeah, because I remember one got in, the other one didn't, and I remember them being like, "How did they not give this?" So you're probably right. So it's probably series. Um, I don't know. I don't it's weird. I can't say that for sure, but then I don't really fully agree with Siri either with Squid Game. I'm gonna actually just throw Diplomat in the 5. I'm gonna throw Diplomat as 5.
That was my number 7, if it helps. I do not think it's a lock by any stretch because I think it did poorly enough in season 1 with the Emmys that it's obviously not so below. Also, it is fun, but it's not as serious as any show we've mentioned so far. And so I do feel like that's something to consider. But Sari, counterpoint.
Well, I was gonna say I feel like the political climate might change that a little bit with what's going on. Same thing with Handmaid's Tale, and I know we haven't really touched on that because I don't necessarily like Abe, I'm with you. I don't know that they are gonna or get a whole lot of love at the Emmys, but I do feel like it is likened a lot to what is going on in real life. And so shows like The Diplomat and Handmaid's Tale, I feel like there might be a little more relatability at this year, more so than others.
This is also the kind of category where it's the top category. We can have, as we've had disappointing in the last few years, where like White Lotus dominated all the supporting races. That like the Pit has all these amazing supporting cast members. Will any of them even be nominated? Similarly, The Handmaid's Tale, I think, sounds like in season four set a record for most nominations without a single win. They got 20, I think 21 nominations, didn't win anything. And season five, they literally got just Best Actress for Elizabeth Moss and nothing else. And so the idea of being welcomed back from that, even though The Crown was sort of like that, even though it didn't fall off Best Drama Series. Season five was almost completely snubbed, and season six it came back strong, did everything, was great. Whereas like The Last of Us, season six was shut out for no reason after being consistently nominated, and that was like so it's really hard to know. I feel like we're looking for spot number eight if we put Diplomat in seven at Your Friends and Neighbors because of the recency factor. I feel like everything else has something going for it. That said, it feels weird to completely forget about Yellow Jackets because Yellow Jackets is a weird show. And for season one and two to get nominated, I personally think season three is the best season. And I saw the absolute, like, not so enthusiasm for season four when the renewal was announced recently. Like, people love that show. And it is dark, it is twisted, it is like there's cannibalism, there's a lot of other stuff going on. And that's not even the worst of it. But I don't, it feels weird to just like knock it off, even though I feel like so many times, like The Shield is one of my favorite shows. The fact that only, that it like completely waned and that by the end of the show, no one was talking about it, wasn't any Emmy nominations is crazy because shows don't always just like start and then not end up as good. Some shows consistently stay good or even get better.
I think though that was because of the network it was on. I think that probably had to do with why it wasn't as favorited as
That's
it
true.
should have been.
So yeah, I mean, I guess so. Our real question here is seven and eight because that's also the Jackal I was hyping up before. Like I don't know. So what do you guys have for what would you throw in for seven and eight?
I mean, I think you're right. I think Your Friends and Neighbors, I think people are really underestimating that show. So I can totally slip that into seven or eight. Um, Abe, you might have convinced me. I mean, I might actually agree with you on Yellow Jackets. I really might because
Getting in
again,
or not getting in? Because I didn't have it
getting
in my
getting
eight.
getting getting in,
Ah,
getting in because of the fact that I think there's so many actors in that show that people like. And I think that the cast could kind of push it over the edge. Especially they added Hilary Swank this season, and talk about someone who's a really strong awards player. Hilary Swank, still got Melanie Linsky in there. The whole entire young supporting cast of the younger,
who's never been nominated? That's the problem though. Is that only Melanie and Christina Ricci have been nominated, and so that makes me think like, what a great cast. They're not watching.
yeah. But I just can't see. I mean, we talked about I pointed out and when I was talking about it, like with Paradise. I can't. It's like right on the cusp. Like I could like they're kind of interchangeable for me. Like I would put maybe Yellow Jackets or Paradise. It's like, oh, do they want something new and something different? Well, they put that in there. I don't think Handmaid's Tale is getting it. I really don't, especially not from the negative reactions that I'm reading right now from the finale. I think that's done. I think we're lucky if we see Elizabeth Moss get in, and that's kind of it.
This is where I would throw in Landman.
Mm, interesting.
This is where
Well,
I'm like, I mean, even and as much as I love Paradise and I love Sterling K. Brown, I just feel like that would be that I would be surprised, but not that surprised. I'd be like, oh yeah, that makes sense.
I think communally speaking, we have our first three. I'd say Slow Horses is probably our collective fourth. Sari, are you still doubting The Last of Us as a nominee? And are you both doubting Andor as a nominee? Or can we agree that those two are probably in?
I think those two are in. I do. I don't think that they're gonna win, but I think as far as being nominated, sure. Yeah.
Yeah, I would say so too. And I would actually put
That's
I would actually
six.
put Last of Us still higher. As surprising as much as everyone's kind of poo-pooing on it right now, I still think that it's being talked about. And I think that's the most important thing that people don't realize when you're going into voting is what are people talking about?
So right, also The Diplomat is not new. It
No,
aired
and
a
no
long
one's
time
talking
ago,
about it.
but people do seem to like it. And it had Allison Janney bigger role, Kerry Russell who got the nom. So I'm torn because at 7 and 8, again, I said before The Diplomats and Your Friend and Neighbor, but I don't know. I feel like Yellow Jacket should be in there. To not even talk about House of the Dragon feels a little weird, even though I feel like that doesn't have a lot of buzz.
No.
What are we thinking? What's everyone's 7 and 8?
I I think Diplomat. I mean, Diplomat's definitely on my list. I think Allison Janney definitely can get a nom on her own. And probably Carrie Russell too. But yeah, that's I would lock that in.
And you would put Lanniman as your number 8.
Yeah. Sure.
What do you
It's
think, Scott?
I'm gonna put Your Friends and Neighbors as my no, I'm gonna put Your Friends and Neighbors as my 7, and I'm gonna put Yellow Jackets as my 8.
So no Diplomat. Okay. I don't want to not predict Yellow Jackets because I love the idea of it, but I feel like in a sense, the better it gets, the more heavy voters are turned on. I don't know. That's my problem. Because I also think that interestingly, what they did this year is they gave the first four episodes as screeners only, and it's the last few that are actually like the really intense, like game-changing ones. And I've been circulating a theory that I think is completely wrong, and I'm sure there's plenty of people online who are already disproving this, that we basically it's told in flashback and present day. And my theory is that we're seeing the flashbacks and that the present day we're seeing isn't actually from there. That like similar to the last season of Lost, how it was like a flash sideways thing, that they don't actually like get rescued, and that this is like some other. I don't know if that makes any sense, but I feel like I've come up with my own theories, and I'm excited about that. Like I've gotten more into it than I ever had, and the people are so much fun, especially the young cast are so much fun to talk to. So I want to rein in my personal enthusiasm for Yellow Jackets and the fact that I'd like it to be there, and therefore say The Diplomat and Your Friends and Neighbors as number 7 and 8. So I'm glad we have some exciting movie. None of us said Squid Game in the end. That's still a possibility. Um, and there could still be some, Bridgerton, who knows? Um, and I also think Your Friends and Neighbors is much, much further down like Gold Derby's odds. And so I don't know if we're overestimating it, but I also think there's still a lot of time between now and when Emmy voting is happening. So I'm excited. This is the most exciting category in a lot of ways for me. And I'm so thrilled that hopefully not just White Lotus actors who are still very good get some nominations for these projects. So any other closing thoughts for this category?
I think we should just every single person should just so it doesn't get confusing should go through and go 1 to 8
Okay.
just so everyone has it individually.
Why don't you start us off, Scott?
Okay, so I'm gonna go The Pit, Severance, White Lotus, The Last of Us, Slow Horses, Andor, Your Friends and Neighbors, and Yellow Jackets.
All right. Sarah, you want to go next?
Okay, well, I gotta think about this order. I'm gonna go The Pit, Severance, White Lotus, Slow Horses. What number am I at? Hang on.
It's 4.
Four. Um, The Diplomat. Oh God, I really want to put Squid Game in there. Squid Game. What's that?
And don't
5?
forget your two under The Last of Us and Andor that you didn't want to
Oh God,
predict.
yes, The Last of Us and Andor. I'm throwing them in. Yeah, you're
And
right.
then is number 8 The Diplomat for you?
The order is so hard for me, you guys.
It's just for me, my order is always
Yes,
likeliest to get nominated, not likeliest to win, because I
yes,
feel like Andor, for instance, I think has a much likelier chance to win than it does to get nominated. Like, you know what I mean? Not that
true.
I'm saying it's going to win, don't
No,
worry.
true. And if we're going for sentimental favorites, I would start throwing in wild stuff like From. I'd be like, ah, but I mean,
Black Doves, some really good stuff. There's, yeah, absolutely. Also, I would say Severance, The Pit, The White Lotus, The Last of Us, Andor, Slow Horses, The Diplomat, Your Friends and Neighbors. So we have lots to look forward to. We hope our colleague Latasha will be on for our next soon to be able to talk with more. She has her own perspective on all this stuff. But we thank you for joining us. I'm Abe Friedtanzer.
I'm Sari Cohen.
And I'm Scott Menzel.
Stay tuned for lots more excitement.